Hello viewers, welcome to my YouTube channel. Get ready for heart-touching stories. Don't forget to subscribe and let's begin.
I was 11 years old the first time I heard my mother call me that. I was supposed to hear it. I'd come downstairs for a glass of water, barefoot on the cold hallway tiles, and stop just outside the kitchen because I heard my name. Not my name exactly, the shape of it wrapped in something else. He's not even really family, Robert. He's your father's charity project. I don't understand why we have to treat him like one of our own. My father didn't answer right away. I remember the silence stretching so long I thought maybe I'd misheard. Then he said quietly, because Dad asked us to. That was the whole argument. That was the whole 13 years I lived in that house. My name is Daniel Voss. When I was 6, my birth parents died in a car accident on Route 9, 2 miles from a farm that belonged to a man named Walter Voss, a man I had never met who was not related to me by blood, who had, as far as anyone could tell, no obligation to me whatsoever. He was driving home from the hardware store when he saw the wreck. He was the one who pulled me out of the back seat. He was the one who sat with me at the hospital because I had no other family to call. And when it turned out I truly had no other family, no grandparents, no aunts, no one, he was the one who asked if he could take me home. I don't remember much from before that night. I remember the farm. I remember Walter teaching me to whittle with a pocket knife too sharp for a 6-year-old's hands, and how he never once complained about the bandages that resulted. I remember him reading to me every night from the same battered copy of Treasure Island, doing all the voices badly, and me loving it anyway. Walter had a son, Robert, my adoptive father, if you can call it that, since the adoption was Walter's doing and Robert never seemed to have signed up for the arrangement. Robert lived 2 towns over with his wife, Carol, and their 2 biological children, Michael and Ellen. When Walter's health started to decline, 3 years after he took me in, he made the decision that would define the rest of my childhood. He moved in with Robert and Carol and he brought me with him. I don't think Robert ever said no to his father in his life. I don't think he knew how, but I don't think he ever really said yes to me either. For the next 10 years, I lived in that house as a kind of asterisk. Michael and Ellen got new clothes for the school year. I got Michael's old ones, a size too big, cuffed at the wrists. Michael and Ellen had their birthdays celebrated with cake and presents and friends invited over. My birthday came and went most years with a card, sometimes not even that. When report cards came home, Carol would beam over Ellen's B-pluses and barely glance at my straight A's, as if academic effort from me were somehow suspicious, an attempt to curry favor rather than something a kid might just be good at. Grandpa Walter noticed. Grandpa Walter always noticed. He was the buffer between me and the rest of that house. When Carol forgot to pack my lunch for the third time in a month, he started making it himself, standing in the kitchen at 6 a.m. with his hands shaking slightly from the Parkinson's that was just beginning to show. When Robert suggested, in that vague, conflict-avoidant way of his, that maybe I should start looking into trade schools instead of college, not everyone's cut out for it, Danny, and it's expensive. Walter was the one who sat me down that night and told me he didn't care what it cost. I was going wherever I got in, and that was the end of the discussion. But he was getting older, frailer. And there's only so much one aging man can do to shield a kid from a household that has already decided who does and doesn't belong. The charity project comment wasn't a one-time thing. It became a kind of shorthand in that house, usually delivered when the adults thought I wasn't listening, sometimes not even bothering to check. Michael picked it up first, using it as a taunt when we were alone, charity case, until Grandpa caught him at it once and the look on Walter's face sent Michael scurrying out of the room without another word. Ellen was younger and mostly just absorbed the household's tone without examining it, the way kids do. Carol never used the phrase to my face. She didn't need to. She had a whole vocabulary of small cruelties that never required it. The way she'd introduce me to guests as Robert's father's ward. Never my son, never even part of the family. The way she'd count out portions at dinner as though I might eat more than my share, though I never did. I left for college at 18 and didn't look back, not really. I called Grandpa every Sunday. I visited him whenever I could, timing it around when Robert and Carol were out. He'd gotten his own small apartment attached to their property by then, a converted guest house, his own space, his own door. I think that door meant more to both of us than either of us said out loud. He died when I was 26. Congestive heart failure in his sleep in that converted guest house, alone, which still guts me because I would have come if I'd known if anyone had called me, but Robert didn't think to until the morning after. The funeral was small. I stood at the back. Carol didn't look at me once. Robert shook my hand like I was a distant cousin he vaguely recognized. 3 weeks later, the family gathered for the reading of the will. I almost didn't go. I told myself I didn't need anything from that house, that whatever Grandpa had left me, if he'd left me anything at all, wasn't the point, wasn't why I'd loved him. But something made me put on a suit and drive the 4 hours back, and I'm glad I did, because I would have missed watching my adoptive family's faces change in real time. The estate lawyer, a calm, unhurried woman named Ms. Adami, went through the formalities first. The farm, long since sold, its proceeds invested, was to be divided among my grandchildren, a phrase that made Carol's mouth tighten, because everyone in that room knew Walter had exactly one biological grandchild's worth of assumptions built around that word, and two more than that living in the actual math of his will. Michael and Ellen received their shares without protest. Then Ms. Adami said my name and read that I was to receive an equal share, not a token, not a courtesy, an equal third, and I heard Carol's sharp intake of breath beside me. That can't be right, she said. He wasn't. Daniel isn't. Mr. Voss's will is quite specific on that point, Ms. Adami said without looking up. He also left a letter to be read aloud at this meeting, addressed to the whole family. She unfolded a single page handwritten in Grandpa's careful, old-fashioned script, the same hand that used to write my school excuse notes. To my family, she read. I imagine some of you are surprised by how I've divided things. I want to explain myself, not because I owe anyone an explanation, but because I think the truth deserves to be said out loud, once clearly, so no one can pretend afterward that they didn't hear it. 13 years ago, I pulled a 6-year-old boy out of a wreck on Route 9. I did not do it because I felt sorry for him. I did it because there was a child who needed someone, and I was the someone who was there. I never once in all the years since thought of Daniel as a project, a charity, or an obligation. I thought of him as my grandson because that is what he became the moment he fell asleep in my truck on the way to the hospital with his hand wrapped around my thumb. I felt my throat close. Beside me, Robert had gone very still. I know how this house has treated him. I was not blind, and I was not as helpless as some of you like to believe. I watched a boy get the smallest portions, the oldest clothes, the least attention, a boy who never once complained to me about it because he didn't want to cause trouble, because he had already learned far too young that his place in this family was something he had to earn rather than something that was simply his. It was never something he had to earn. It was mine to give, and I gave it freely the day I chose him. What I regret is not protecting him better from the rest of you while I still could. So here is the truth, plainly stated for the record. Daniel is not a charity project. He's not a ward, not an obligation, not a footnote in this family's story. He's my grandson in every way that has ever mattered to me, and this will reflect that exactly as it should. I love all three of my grandchildren. I only wish all three of them had always been loved the same way in return. Nobody spoke for a long moment after Ms. Adami set the letter down. Carol's face had gone white, then red. Michael was staring at the table. Ellen, 22 now and I think genuinely too young to have understood the worst of it back then, looked like she might cry. Robert looked at me. It was the first time in a long time he'd really looked at me, not through me or past me or around me. I'm sorry, he said, just that. 13 years, and that was all he had. I nodded. I didn't say it was okay because it wasn't, and I think even he knew that. But I said, thank you for telling me you're sorry, because that was true, and it was something, even if it was the smallest something, arriving 20 years too late. I don't know if that letter changed anything between us going forward. Grief doesn't rewrite history, and neither does guilt. Robert and I talk sometimes now carefully, like two people relearning a language they used to speak badly. Carol and I don't talk at all, and I've made peace with that. But I keep a copy of that letter in my desk drawer, and some nights when I doubt whether I really belonged anywhere in that house, I take it out and read it again. Not for the money, for the part where an old man dying made absolutely sure that the truth outlived him. He always did keep his promises, even the ones he made after he was already gone.